picture the scenario because, I mean, I guarantee you have lived it at some point. You're sitting on your couch, just staring at your phone.
Oh, yeah. Just minding your own business.
Right. And you just sent what you thought was a perfectly normal, maybe even like slightly helpful text message to a friend or a partner or a coworker.
Just a standard everyday text.
Exactly. And then 3 minutes go by, and then you see it. That little gray typing bubble appears at the bottom of the screen.
The dreaded typing bubble.
Yes. And it appears, and then it disappears, and then it comes back again. And this goes on for what feels like an absolute eternity.
It's just absolute torture waiting for that text.
It really is.
Yeah.
And finally, the response comes through, and your stomach just instantly drops because they have read your message completely wrong.
Oh, man.
Like, what was supposed to be just a simple, logistical question has suddenly been interpreted as an attack on their character, their life choices, and possibly their childhood.
It is the ultimate modern trap, isn't it? I mean, you go from a resting heart rate to a full-blown stress response in like a matter of seconds.
Yeah, instantly.
And the terrifying part is that the conversation has just spiraled entirely out of your control before you even fully realize you're having an argument.
Right. You haven't even opened your mouth.
Exactly. You haven't spoken a single word out loud, yet somehow you're in the middle of a massive conflict.
And once you're locked in, it is so hard to get out. I mean, your thumbs start flying across the screen. You're trying to defend yourself.
You're
yeah. Maybe you throw a little passive aggression back their way. And before you know it, you are walking away from this interaction completely frustrated, and your relationship is just slightly more damaged than it was 10 minutes ago.
Which is such a terrible feeling.
It is. And then comes the worst part, right? The aftermath. Yeah. You're standing in the shower like 3 hours later, replaying the entire exchange in your head, coming up with all the perfect comebacks.
Oh, the shower arguments. We all have them.
You're thinking, if I had just phrased it this way, I would have won. Or why on earth did I let them get under my skin like that?
That lingering sense of regret mixed with this desperate desire for a do-over, it's incredibly universal. I mean, we spend an exorbitant amount of our lives communicating, yet we are remarkably bad at navigating the friction that inevitably comes with it.
So bad at it.
Right. And that exact feeling, that frustrating cyclical failure to connect, is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Yes, welcome. We are stepping in as your guides today, specifically curating this deep dive for you, the learner, because we really want to get to the bottom of this.
We do. And we're doing that by looking at the insights of Jefferson Fisher. He's a Texas trial lawyer who basically noticed that our fundamental approach to conflict is just completely broken.
Yeah.
And he outlined all of this in his book, The Next Conversation, Argue Less, Talk More.
Which is such a fascinating source material for us today. Because when you think of a trial lawyer, I mean, you picture someone whose entire professional existence is predicated on arguing.
Oh, totally.
You picture someone cross-examining witnesses, aggressively pointing fingers, and fundamentally trying to, win at all costs. But Fisher took a completely different path.
He really did.
He didn't build his following, and he has a following of millions, by dissecting complex Supreme Court precedents or, teaching people how to verbally destroy their opponents.
Right, which is what you expect.
Exactly. He built it by sitting in the front seat of his truck, sometimes with a kid's sippy cup visibly in the back seat, and filming these incredibly raw, profound videos on the actual mechanics of human communication.
It's a brilliant paradox, honestly. I mean, he makes a living in the most adversarial environment possible, the American legal system.
Yeah.
But his core message is about dismantling this toxic myth that you need to win an argument in your daily life. He's essentially arguing that the mechanics of everyday conflict are entirely misunderstood by the general public. We treat arguments with our spouses or our coworkers like we're litigating a case in front of a jury.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is, and it's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to deconstruct the mechanics of everyday conflict, move past that myth of winning, and equip you with practical tools.
Real, actionable tools.
Exactly. Everything from recognizing your own biological triggers to mastering what he calls the conversational breath, so you can actually take control of your next conversation.
I love that. And to really understand how he arrived at this whole philosophy, I think we need to look at his background, because he didn't just stumble into the legal profession.
Oh, not at all.
He comes from a very long, entrenched line of Texas trial lawyers. We are talking about his great-grandfather, who was a federal judge, his grandfather, his dad, his cousins, his great-uncles.
It's like a family dynasty.
It really is.
Oh, okay.
It's not just a job for this family. It is the water they swim in.
It's practically genetic at that point. And when you grow up in an environment where everyone around you makes a living by persuading others, you start to pick up on the nuances of communication very early on.
You have to.
Right. You learn that speaking and communicating are two entirely different actions.
Yes. And there's this great story he shares in the book that highlights that exact distinction. He's like 8 years old on a family hunting trip in the hill country of West Texas.
Such a classic Texas setting.
Totally. He's sitting in the corner of a cabin in his Spider-Man underwear, shivering after a shower. He's drinking an IBC root beer, eating way too much beef jerky, and just observing the adults.
Just taking it all in.
Yeah. And he watches his grandfather hold court and tell a story to the family.
But the detail that stuck with Fisher wasn't the plot of the story itself, right? It was the delivery.
Yes.
Because Fisher had actually heard his grandfather tell the exact same story earlier that day to one person out by the trucks while they were, looking for some paint.
Oh.
And out there, the story was flat. It was, matter of fact, it was just a simple exchange of information. But later, inside the cabin with an audience, it transformed.
It became a full-blown performance. I mean, his grandfather was using his hands, his facial expressions were super animated, his volume would drop down to this intense leaning in whisper for the suspenseful parts, and then boom, across the room with the punchline.
Just captivating the whole room.
Exactly. Fisher described it as watching a magic show, and he had this realization that while practicing law might be the family profession, communication like advocacy through the art of storytelling was the family's true passion.
Yeah.
He grew up literally running toward conflict and persuasion.
Which perfectly sets the stage for one of the most intense, illustrative moments in his career. It's a moment that fundamentally challenges our standard reaction to hostility, and it involves a man named Bobby Lepre.
Oh, this story is incredible.
If you really want to understand the core of Fisher's approach to de-escalation, this deposition is the perfect case study.
Let's set the scene for this because it sounds like something straight out of a movie.
It really does.
So Fisher is representing a bystander who unfortunately got caught up in a bar fight, and he has to take a deposition from a witness. Enter Bobby Lepre.
Right.
Fisher walks into this standard, sterile conference room, probably expecting just an average guy. Instead, he finds a man he describes as half human, half giant.
A huge guy.
Massive. Bobby is wearing these heavy tan coveralls with Lepre embroidered on the pocket, and he is just physically terrifying. When they shake hands, Bobby just crushes Fisher's hand.
It's a physical dominance play right out of the gate.
Yep.
And the atmosphere in the room is instantly suffocating. So Fisher starts with the standard chronological softball questions that lawyers always use to establish a baseline.
Like, what time did you arrive at the bar?
Exactly. Who are you talking to? These shouldn't be triggering questions at all, but Bobby is vibrating with hostility.
You can just picture it.
His eyebrows are deeply furrowed. He's breathing heavily through his mouth. He's wringing these massive hands. He is entirely unregulated.
The guy is basically a balloon that is overinflated, and you just know he is going to pop.
Yeah.
And then Fisher politely asks if Bobby needs a break, and that is the pinprick.
That's all it took.
Bobby just explodes. He slams his massive hand onto the antique conference table, points a thick finger directly at Fisher, and yells, "You can cut all this buddy-buddy stuff."
Wow.
He proceeds to tell Fisher that lawyers are the worst thing to happen to America, that all they do is lie, and finishes by saying, "So go on and ask me your stupid questions. Just know I don't trust you as far as I can throw you."
Which is terrifying.
Right, because a guy that size could probably throw a person very far.
Exactly. Now let's freeze that moment and analyze the biological and psychological reality of what's happening to Fisher right there.
Okay.
The standard human reaction to being insulted, screamed at, and physically intimidated is defense. Fisher openly admits his ears got hot. He felt that flush of adrenaline.
Oh, for sure.
His body was tensing up, preparing for a fight. He was used to people harboring a general distaste for lawyers, but it was that specific phrase, "stupid questions," that hooked his ego.
Because it's a direct attack on his competence. I mean, he spent years in law school, passed the bar, prepared for this specific case, and this guy is dismissing his professional expertise as stupid.
Right.
The overwhelming temptation in that moment is to use your verbal agility to cut the guy down to size, to put him in his place and reassert dominance in the room.
But that is exactly where Fisher deviates from the norm. Instead of firing back with a sharp retort or a threat, he chooses emotional restraint.
Which is so hard.
It's incredibly hard. He takes a breath. He lets 10 full seconds of absolute uncomfortable silence pass. That alone takes so much discipline.
10 seconds of silence in a tense room feels like an hour.
It really does. Then he smiles softly and says, well, maybe you're right. And he waits another 10 seconds. The silence forces the adrenaline in the room to start dissipating. Then Fisher leans forward, changing his posture from adversarial to inquisitive, and asks a question that completely alters the reality of the room. He says, tell me, please, what's been your biggest struggle this year?
It is such a jarring pivot. If someone screams at you about your profession and you just calmly ask them about their personal struggles, it completely short-circuits their aggression.
Totally short-circuits it.
Bobby is understandably taken aback. He scoffs and says, say what? And Fisher just repeats it very gently. What's been your biggest personal struggle this year?
And the physical transformation that follows is profound. Fisher notes that all the anger just melted off Bobby's face. The tension dropped. He got very still.
Yeah.
And then this giant, intimidating man starts to talk. Hesitantly at first, but then it all just pours out. He reveals that just the month prior, he had to put his mother into an assisted living facility. His father had passed away. His brother was a roughneck who moved around constantly, leaving Bobby entirely alone to manage this massive crisis. He is drowning in medical paperwork, legal letters from banks, and threats of foreclosure on his mother's house.
Suddenly, the context of his hatred for lawyers makes perfect sense. I mean, lawyers are the ones sending him letters threatening to take away his mother's home.
Exactly.
The giant, angry man in the tan coveralls wasn't actually mad at Fisher. He was an incredibly scared, overwhelmed son who felt like he was failing his family.
It breaks your heart.
It really does. And Fisher just looks at him and says, I'm sorry, I can't imagine what that's like, but what I can tell you is you're a good son. And Bobby Lepre puts his face in his hands and starts sobbing.
It's a masterful de-escalation. They end up going off the record, and Fisher just sits with him for 20 minutes, letting him vent this massive emotional burden. Fisher even takes out his laptop and emails an elder law colleague right there to get Bobby some pro bono advice.
That's amazing.
And when they finally resume the deposition, the hostility is entirely gone. Bobby is cooperative, he's even cracking jokes. And when it's all over, instead of that bone-crushing intimidation handshake, Bobby gives Fisher a bear hug that literally lifts him off the ground.
So let's unpack the mechanics of what actually happened here. Why did Fisher ask that specific question? It stems from a foundational premise that I think every single person listening needs to write on a Post-it note and stick to their bathroom mirror.
Oh, absolutely.
And that premise is, the person you see isn't the person you're talking to.
That is the crux of the iceberg concept in human interaction. We are so easily distracted by the visual and auditory data right in front of us. We see the aggression, the shouting, the insults. That is the tiny fraction of the iceberg visible above the waterline.
Right. That's Bobby yelling about lawyers.
Exactly. But the massive, dangerous chunk of ice beneath the surface, the fear of foreclosure, the grief of losing a parent's independence, the profound vulnerability, that is the real engine driving the behavior. If you only react to the tip of the iceberg, you are going to crash your ship every single time.
And Fisher actually learned this lesson about hidden depths long before he was a lawyer. When he was just a third grader, he was part of a reading buddy program.
This story got to me.
Me too. He was paired with a kid named Evan. Evan was older, physically much bigger, but he was struggling severely with reading. Fisher, on the other hand, had two parents who read to him every single night, so he was advanced for his age.
Right.
He would sit on these beanbags in the library and try to help Evan sound out the words in simple books like brown bear, what do you see?
And even as a child, Fisher started to pick up on the contextual clues of Evan's life. He noticed that Evan's clothes were always 3 sizes too big. He noticed that while Fisher brought a brown paper lunch bag from home with a smiley face drawn on by his mother, Evan always went through the cafeteria line for the free lunch.
Yeah, these seem like small details, but they point to a massive disparity in their foundational environments.
They really do.
Yeah.
And the moment it all clicked was when Fisher was trying to explain the difference between the words throw, through, and through.
Right.
He used what he thought was a universally relatable analogy. He said to Evan, think of how you throw a baseball to your dad.
Oh, wow.
And Evan just stopped, looked at him with this completely flat, hollow expression and said, I don't know who my dad is.
That is heavy for a third grader.
It is. Fisher found out later that Evan was living with his grandparents because his father had abandoned them and his mother was currently in jail. Fisher wrote about that moment, saying, "I knew then that he was living in a world I knew nothing about."
That realization is the bedrock of true emotional restraint. When Bobby LaPrey was screaming in the conference room decades later, Fisher remembered Evan.
Yes.
He understood a vital psychological truth. A disproportionate reaction like taking what should be a level 1 conversation and instantly escalating it to a level 10 shouting match means there is a hidden conversation happening in that person's head that you are not invited to.
Spot on.
Bobby wasn't responding to Fisher's question about the bar fight. He was responding to the letters from the bank.
Which totally dismantles the way we usually approach conflict. If the person in front of you is reacting to a hidden trauma or a hidden stressor, then trying to win the argument on the surface level is entirely pointless.
It's useless.
Fisher states this as an absolute rule. Never win an argument, because winning is a losing game.
Okay, wait. I want to jump in with an analogy here because I was thinking about this when reading the source.
Oh, go for it.
Trying to win an argument with someone you care about is basically like playing tug of war with your spouse. If your only goal is to win, you might decide to just pull out a knife and cut the rope.
Ooh, yeah.
Sure, you don't get pulled into the mud, you stay standing, but you have completely destroyed the connection between the two of you.
That is the perfect way to visualize the cost of winning. Because what do you actually get when you win an argument against someone you care about? You bludgeon them into submission with a barrage of facts, or you humiliate them with a sharper, faster comeback.
Right, you get the last word.
You get the last word, the conversation abruptly ends, and you won. But let's look at your prize. You still have the exact same unresolved underlying issue, but now you have added a layer of resentment, hurt feelings, broken trust, and a damaged relationship.
Yeah, you won the battle and just salted the earth of the relationship in the process.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to look at how the concept of arguing has devolved. Fisher points out that in ancient Greece, debates were entirely different beasts.
Oh yeah, the philosophers?
Right. Philosophers would debate a topic for days on end, but the objective was rarely to humiliate or conquer the opponent. The goal was the mutual refinement of truth.
Wow.
If you exposed a weakness in someone else's argument, it was considered a service, a way to strengthen the overall idea.
That is so different from today.
Fast forward to today, and our arguments are purely mechanisms for ego preservation. We use social media as a megaphone to scream our absolute rightness into the void.
And it never works. Think about it. Have you ever, in the history of the internet, seen someone reply to a harsh, aggressive political comment with, "Wow, you know what? Your aggressive insult has completely changed my worldview"? I concede.
Never. It literally never happens because the human brain is not wired to accept new information when it feels it is under attack.
Exactly.
If your goal is to beat the other person, you will fail to change their mind. The goal should be to unravel the knot. An argument is simply a noisy, messy window into another person's struggle.
Yeah.
If you can develop the emotional discipline to peel back the layers and see the fear hiding underneath, the Evan who is mourning the absence of his dad, or the Bobby who is terrified of failing his mother, that is where real transformative communication begins.
So if we accept this paradigm shift, if we abandon the toxic, ego-driven goal of winning the argument in this exact moment, it fundamentally alters our timeline. Well, if scoring points right now is off the table because their brain is hijacked by stress, it means all the pressure we put on the current shouting match is wasted energy. The real work, the actual resolution, has to happen later, which brings us to the concept of the next conversation.
This is a crucial pivot in how we structure our relationships. We place an overwhelming, almost paralyzing amount of pressure on the first conversation.
We really do.
Think about a first date, a high-stakes job interview, or like the initial confrontation when a roommate doesn't pay rent. Fisher argues that first conversations are inherently flawed vehicles for truth.
Because everyone's guard is up.
Exactly. Everyone is heavily armored. We are all playing a role, projecting the idealized version of ourselves and managing the other person's perception of us.
Right. It's a performance. It's only in the next conversation that the masks start to slip and the truth actually comes out.
Right.
Think about when you have a massive blow-up fight with a close friend. You both storm off, slamming doors, completely furious. The first conversation was a disaster of emotional reactivity.
Total disaster.
But the next conversation, the one where you awkwardly meet up for coffee 3 weeks later, that is where the healing happens. It has the immense benefit of hindsight, lowered heart rates, and time for reflection.
But As Fisher warns, there is a massive psychological trap waiting for us between the first conversation and the next one. It's something we all do, the mental rehearsal.
Oh, I do this all the time.
We spend the days leading up to that coffee meeting, scripting the entire interaction in our heads. Usually while we are driving or standing in the shower,
Yep.
we imagine sitting down, stating our case with perfect eloquence and undeniable logic.
Mhm.
And in our heads, the other person listens quietly, looks at us with tears in their eyes and says, "You know what? You are 100% right. I am a monster, I acted terribly, and I beg for your forgiveness."
Which again, never happens. But the danger is that because we have meticulously scripted that fantasy in our heads, our brains start to expect it as reality. So the second we sit down for coffee and they deviate from our script, the second they push back and say, well, actually, I was really hurt by what you did before I yelled, our brain just short circuits.
Right, we panic.
We instantly get defensive and angry, not necessarily because of what they said, but because they didn't read the lines we wrote for them. We set ourselves up for failure by demanding a specific outcome.
Precisely. And the root cause of that failure is that our goals for the conversation were completely unrealistic. We went into the meeting with the goal of proving something. I want to prove to them that they were wrong and I was right.
Right.
Fisher says if we want the next conversation to succeed, we have to fundamentally shift our goal from proving something to learning something.
Okay, so a realistic goal sounds like, I want to understand their perspective on what happened without getting defensive. That is something you actually have control over. Oh, wait. I want to pause here and push back a little because I know what you, the listener, are probably thinking right now. This all sounds very enlightened, but what if the other person is being genuinely unreasonable?
That's the big question.
Right. What if you are dealing with a boss who is toxic, a partner who is manipulative, or a family member who is incredibly selfish? If my goal is always just to learn and understand them, aren't I just volunteering to be a doormat? Where is the line between seeking understanding and just taking abuse?
That is the most important caveat to this entire philosophy. Seeking to understand is not synonymous with submission.
Okay.
Fisher makes a very sharp distinction between understanding a perspective and agreeing with it. Setting a goal to understand does not mean you are conceding your point, validating their toxic behavior, or abandoning your boundaries.
So what does it mean?
It means you are gathering data. You can completely, thoroughly understand why a manipulative person is acting the way they are. Perhaps tracing it back to their own insecurities or need for control, and then use that profound understanding to firmly, calmly, and permanently walk away from them.
Okay, so understanding is the reconnaissance mission. It doesn't mean you have to surrender the fort.
Exactly. And to ensure you don't surrender the fort, to truly protect your boundaries while remaining open, Fisher introduces the concept of conversational values. If your goal to learn is your destination, your conversational values are your compass.
I like that.
They dictate how you will behave and navigate the terrain, regardless of what the other person throws at you. You don't sink to their level. You don't start screaming just because they are screaming, because your values hold your behavior steady.
He shares a few of his personal conversational values in the book, and they are incredibly grounding. One is, where there is room for kindness, I will use it.
That's a great one.
And my personal favorite is, if I can't be a bridge, I'll be a lighthouse. Meaning, if the hostility is too great or the gap between us is too wide to build a bridge of connection right now, I am not going to jump into the stormy water and drown with you.
Wow.
Instead, I will stand firm on the shore, project light, maintain my own integrity, and be a safe reference point for when you are ready to navigate back.
It's a beautiful metaphor for maintaining your own character in the face of chaos.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't actually know what their core conversational values are. We rarely sit down and define them.
True.
So Fisher suggests a terrifying but brilliant exercise. Pullman's a close friend. You sit down with someone who knows you intimately and ask them 3 questions.
Sure.
First, what are 3 words you would use to describe my character?
Okay.
Second, what topics do I get most enthusiastic about when I talk? And third, what emotion do you wish I showed more of?
Oh man, that last question is brutal. What emotion do you wish I showed more of? You have to be ready for some uncomfortable honesty.
You really do.
But if your friend says, I wish you showed more patience, or I wish you showed more empathy instead of jumping to fix things, that gives you a direct roadmap to the values you need to intentionally bring into your next conversation.
It totally eliminates your blind spots. So once you have set realistic goals and defined your values, you are mentally prepared. But there is a massive logistical hurdle we haven't discussed yet.
What's that?
We often fail to reach our communication goals, not because of bad intentions, but because we completely misunderstand the medium we are using to communicate. We mistake the mere exchange of data for actual human connection.
This is such a critical point for the modern world. Let's look at how texting ruins our lives.
Oh, yes.
Fisher shares this text message exchange with his mom that perfectly, hilariously illustrates this trap. I'll read the mother's text, you read Fisher's. It starts with his mom texting. Do you know how many miles are on the white Nissan?
No, ma'am.
You don't have any idea what the mileage is?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I thought you'd know how many miles were on the white Nissan.
Mama, I don't know how else to tell you. I don't know the mileage on the white Nissan.
That's fine, Jefferson. I just don't like your attitude.
It is so funny, but also so tragic, because if you look at the raw data of the text, there is zero attitude.
None.
It is just black text on a white screen. But the medium of texting completely stripped away the human element, the tone, the facial expression, the cadence. The medium failed the message.
And this brings us to a vital distinction Fisher makes between two concepts: transmission versus connection. Most of what we do all day on our phones and laptops is transmission.
Right.
Transmission is sending and receiving signals through a cold medium. Text messages, emails, Slack channels, Microsoft Teams, pings. It is incredibly efficient for moving data from point A to point B, but it is utterly indifferent to understanding and authenticity. It's transactional.
Fisher uses a great analogy here. Transmission is like reading the sheet music, but connection is actually hearing the symphony.
Oh, I love that.
Connection is what Fisher calls a two-factor authentication process. It requires two distinct elements to be present simultaneously: understanding and acknowledgement.
Okay, break that down.
If either is missing, the connection fails. If I completely understand the deep emotional pain you are describing to me, but I just sit there staring at you blankly and never acknowledge it, we haven't connected. You feel unheard.
Right.
Conversely, if I acknowledge you by nodding vigorously and saying, wow, but I have absolutely no idea what you just said because I was thinking about lunch, we haven't connected either. It requires both.
And a really important caveat Fisher adds is that connection isn't always this warm, fuzzy Hallmark movie moment. Connection can be deeply uncomfortable and fraught with friction.
Definitely.
True connection sometimes means looking an employee in the eye and saying, I understand exactly how hard you worked on this project. I acknowledge the late nights you put in, but the answer is still no, we aren't moving forward with it. Honest communication prioritizes clarity over comfort.
Yes, clarity is kindness.
And frankly, sometimes disconnection is the right choice. Some people, in certain moments, simply do not want to be reached. And having the wisdom to recognize that and step back is a form of boundary setting.
But when we do genuinely want to connect, we often unknowingly sabotage ourselves. Fisher outlines 3 distinct cuts to connection. 3 ways we accidentally sever the line between ourselves and the other person.
And the first cut is wild.
The first cut is one of the most fascinating because it is rooted in literal biology, a lack of awareness.
This absolutely blew my mind when I read it. During an argument, someone will inevitably yell, "Do you even hear the tone of your voice right now?" And the wild scientific truth is, no, you literally do not.
It's a biological blind spot. When you speak, the sound you perceive in your own head is not the same sound that exits your mouth.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's a mix of 2 different pathways. Yes, some sound waves travel through the air and enter your outer ear, but a massive portion of the sound you hear is conducted internally through the bones of your skull.
Bone conduct.
Exactly. Your vocal cords vibrate, and those vibrations travel up through your jawbone and directly into your inner ear. Bone is denser than air, so it amplifies the lower frequencies. This makes your voice sound deeper, richer, and calmer to you than it actually is.
This is why everyone cringes when they hear a recording of their own voice. You listen to a voicemail you left and think, do I really sound that thin and whiny? Yes. Yes, you do.
You do?
Because for the first time, you are hearing your voice through air conduction alone, which is exactly how the rest of the world has been hearing you your entire life.
So, the physical physics of how sound travels through our skull acts as a perfect, undeniable metaphor for our psychological blind spots. We literally cannot perceive our own tone accurately in real time.
That is so crazy to think about.
We don't realize that our volume has crept up, that our sighs sound dismissive, or that our rapid speech sounds aggressive. We're stumbling around in the dark, constantly stepping on other people's emotional toes and then getting offended when they accuse us of yelling, because inside our own heads, we sound perfectly reasonable.
That lack of self-awareness leads directly to the second cut to connection, a lack of understanding. If the first cut is an auditory blind spot, the second cut is a perspective blind spot.
Right.
Fisher likens this to insisting on viewing the entire universe exclusively through your own telescope and refusing to even look through anyone else's. It's egocentrism.
Totally.
It's a difference between looking at a coworker's mistake and saying, how could you possibly do that? You must be incompetent, versus getting curious and asking, what were the pressures or the missing pieces of information that led a smart person to make that choice?
And then we have the third cut to connection, which is a lack of self-assurance. This manifests in how we use language, specifically how we use softening language out of fear.
Oh, I'm guilty of this.
Think about how many times a day you type the phrases, sorry to bother you, but, or this is probably a dumb question, but, or I might be totally wrong here.
So I do that all the time. It feels like politeness. It feels like you are just being respectful of the other person's time.
It masquerades as politeness, but sociolinguistically, it is a defense mechanism. We soften our language because we are terrified of conflict, rejection, or vulnerability. We are preemptively apologizing for taking up space.
Wow.
But what you're actually signaling to the other person is that your own thoughts and needs are an inconvenience. It undermines your authority and muddies the transmission of your needs.
Right.
Fisher makes a profound statement here. True confidence doesn't prioritize perfection, it prioritizes grace. It means having the self-assurance to speak your mind directly and honestly, even if your voice is shaking, trusting that you and the relationship can survive the friction.
But let me pose a modern dilemma here. We just spent a lot of time talking about how texting and Slack are transmission, devoid of empathy, and how vocal tone is crucial. But the reality is modern corporate life runs on transmission.
Very true.
Remote teams operate entirely on Slack and email. So are the sources suggesting it is impossible to build true connection in a remote workplace? Or is there a way to inject connection into these cold mediums?
It's not impossible, but it requires much higher intentionality. The sources suggest that while transmission is excellent for objective data, the meeting is at 2 p.m., the file is attached, it is a terrible vehicle for nuance, feedback, or emotion.
So what do we do?
To build connection over text, you have to be hyper-explicit with your acknowledgement. You can't rely on a thumbs-up emoji. Instead of just replying, got it, to a massive project update, you have to type out the acknowledgement. I see how much weekend work you put into this data set. I understand the roadblock you hit on page 4. Let's jump on a call to fix it.
So you basically have to manually type out the empathy that your face would normally convey.
Exactly. And the golden rule Fisher advocates is this. The moment friction arises, the second a text thread gets tense, passive-aggressive, or confusing, you must switch mediums immediately.
That's smart.
Stop typing. Pick up the phone and start a video call. You have to get back to vocal connection to clear the fog, because trying to resolve an emotional conflict via text is like trying to defuse a bomb with a pair of oven mitts on.
Yeah.
You just don't have the dexterity.
I love that rule. Switch mediums at the first sign of friction. Because if you stay in the text thread or let the misunderstanding fester, the conversation breaks down. And when conflict truly escalates, it ceases to be a psychological issue and becomes a deeply physical one.
Yeah.
Our bodies literally hijack the conversation.
This is where we cross from communication theory into hard neuroscience. To illustrate the biology of an argument, Fisher gives us the hypothetical story of John and Grace. They are a married couple, and they are currently locked in a bitter dispute over their 3-year-old daughter, Lily, and her bedtime.
Oh boy, let's set the scene. It's 8:00 p.m. Anyone with a toddler knows this is the witching hour. Lily is bouncing off the walls, looking like she just drank a double espresso.
Just endless energy.
John and Grace have competing philosophies. John believes in flexibility. He thinks if Lily is energized and wants to play quietly for another 30 minutes, they should let her. He thinks it teaches her to listen to her body. Grace, on the other hand, believes in strict routines. 8:00 p.m. means 8:00 p.m. Structure equals security and good sleep. They have both been biting their tongues about this for 2 weeks, just slowly building up a reservoir of resentment.
And tonight, the dam breaks.
Yeah.
John tells Lily she can stay up a little longer and play with her blocks. Grace overhears this from the kitchen, feels completely undermined, storms in, and yells that it's past bedtime.
Oh, no.
Dawn, feeling attacked, fires back. She's not a robot, Grace. It's not her fault that you have a control problem.
That is a devastating escalation. He took a logistical disagreement about a clock and turned it into a character assassination.
And it triggers an immediate, overwhelming response from Grace. She unleashes 2 weeks of stored resentment. You always bend the rules. You're never here to deal with the fallout the next morning.
Yeah.
What would you know?
Ouch.
And John retaliates with a nuclear option. What do you want? For her to end up highly strung like your crazy mother? Or worse, like you, lonely and without any real friends?
It is brutal. It's the kind of argument that leaves scars. But Fisher argues that to truly understand how a conversation about bedtime devolved into insults about a mother-in-law, we have to pause the tape right there and look at what is happening inside their physical bodies.
We have to look under the hood.
Exactly. He breaks every argument down into two distinct biological phases, ignition and cooling. Right now, as they are screaming at each other, John and Grace are in the peak of the ignition phase.
The ignition phase is entirely controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. This is your evolutionary fight or flight response. If we could put Grace into an fMRI scanner at the exact moment John called her controlling, the imagery would be chaotic.
Chaos.
Her amygdala, which is this tiny almond-shaped cluster of nuclei deep in the brain that acts as the body's threat detection center, would be flashing red. It is screaming that she is under a mortal attack.
Right, because her brain doesn't differentiate between the emotional threat of her husband's insult and the physical threat of a predator in the wild. The biological response is identical.
Exactly identical.
The amygdala signals the hypothalamus, which triggers the adrenal glands to flood her bloodstream with epinephrine, adrenaline, and cortisol.
The physical changes are instantaneous and dramatic. Her pupils literally dilate to let in more light so she can track the predator. Her breathing shifts from the deep diaphragm to fast, shallow chest breaths, desperately pulling in oxygen to prep her muscles to either run away or throw a punch.
Her heart rate spikes.
Yes, but the most critical, devastating piece of the puzzle is what happens to the front of her brain.
Right, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain responsible for complex logic, rational thought, empathy, and emotional regulation. During the ignition phase, the amygdala basically stages a coup.
A biological coup.
It decides that taking the time to rationally ponder a situation is a luxury that will get you killed by the predator. So it suppresses the prefrontal cortex. It redirects blood flow and energy away from the logical brain and pushes it into the survival systems.
Which means, in that moment of intense anger, Grace and John are functionally, neurologically incapable of rational communication. They aren't debating a toddler's sleep needs. Their bodies are just violently attempting to eliminate a perceived threat.
Wow.
Trying to use logic on someone in the ignition phase is like trying to hand a complicated Excel spreadsheet to someone who is currently being chased by a bear. They cannot process it.
But eventually the adrenaline runs out, the fire burns down. This leads to the second phase, cooling. This phase is controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system, often called the rest and digest system.
Right.
The vagus nerve kicks in, releasing acetylcholine, which acts as a brake on the heart. The heart rate slows down, the breathing deepens, and crucially, blood flow returns to the prefrontal cortex.
Logic comes back online. And what is the immediate byproduct of the prefrontal cortex turning back on after a fight? Regret.
Oh, that wave of regret.
John looks across the room, sees the pain on Grace's face, and suddenly the fog lifts. He thinks, oh my God, why did I bring up her mother? Why did I say she has no friends? That sudden wave of shame and regret isn't just a moral awakening. It is literal biological evidence that his rational brain has finally regained control of his mouth.
It's a tragedy of timing. By the time our logic comes back, the damage is done. So the ultimate question is, how do we prevent the explosion? If we know the biology, how do we stop the ignition phase from taking over?
Right.
Fisher says the key is understanding what sets off the alarm in the first place. He introduces the concept of triggers and provides a great, memorable rule of thumb. What triggers you teaches you. If you have a massive reaction to something small, it is pointing to a hidden vulnerability.
We can divide these into physical triggers and psychological triggers. Physical triggers are deeply ingrained and obvious. If someone raises a fist, if a car swerves into your lane, or even if someone just steps uncomfortably close into your personal space, your body senses physical danger and ignites.
Makes sense.
We also have internal physical triggers. If you are severely dehydrated, sleep deprived, or in physical pain, your threshold for ignition is drastically lowered.
But it's the psychological triggers that really ruin our relationships and our careers. Fisher breaks psychological triggers down into three main categories. First is social evaluation.
Right.
This is rooted in evolutionary biology. For early humans, Being rejected by the tribe meant literal death by starvation or exposure. So today, our brains are hypersensitive to the fear of negative judgment or public embarrassment. If I speak up in this meeting, will they think I'm stupid?
That's a big one.
It's the engine behind imposter syndrome and FOMO. If someone mocks an idea you present, your amygdala interprets it as a threat of tribal expulsion.
The second category is personal identity. This occurs when an interaction threatens the core of who you believe you are. It challenges your competence, like, are you implying I can't do my job?
Oh, defensive right away.
Or your autonomy. Why are you micromanaging my schedule? Or your purpose. Does the work I do here even matter? Fisher notes a fascinating point here. Even just hearing the word no from a partner or boss can trigger an identity threat because it inherently restricts your autonomy and agency.
And the third category is loss. This is the anticipated fear of losing something vital, a relationship, a job, social status, or even just comfort. The fear of loss is so powerful that it often causes us to avoid difficult conversations entirely. We calculate that the potential pain of losing a friend over a disagreement feels greater than the chronic discomfort of staying quiet and harboring resentment.
I love the analogy you used earlier when we were reviewing the notes. You described these psychological triggers as unseen tripwires scattered in a dark room.
Yes, because that's exactly what it feels like. You are walking through a conversation thinking everything is fine, and suddenly, click. You step on a tripwire about your competence or your autonomy.
And you didn't even know it was there.
But instantly, the biological alarm is blaring. Your pupils dilate, the adrenaline dumps, and you are in full fight or flight mode, screaming about the dishwasher without fully realizing that what you're actually angry about is feeling undervalued.
And understanding the neuroscience behind those tripwires completely shifts how we should view conflict. When an angry customer or a stressed partner is screaming at you, your instinct is to take it personally. But if you understand the biology, you realize they aren't rationally communicating a point to you.
Right. They're not.
Their body is literally trying to survive an emotional threat. If you can reframe their raised voice, not as a personal attack on your character, but as a biological plea from a hijacked nervous system, it gives you a superpower.
It totally changes the game.
You can maintain your own emotional equilibrium. You can look at them and think, their prefrontal cortex is offline. Their amygdala is currently running the show. I don't need to join them in this panic.
But knowing that intellectually is very different from executing it in the heat of the moment. Because our biology reacts in milliseconds way faster than our logic can catch up.
Stay fast.
The only way to prevent an argument from exploding is to physically intercept the biological reaction in the split second before the storm hits. Which takes us to the most actionable part of this deep dive. Section 5. Controlling the moment, breath, and body.
Fisher paints a very evocative picture to describe this moment of interception. He talks about growing up in East Texas, surrounded by these massive, dense pine trees. The brush is so thick that you can never actually see the horizon. Because of that, you never visually see a storm approaching.
Oh, wow.
Instead, you feel it. The woods suddenly go dead quiet. The birds stop. The barometric pressure drops, and the temperature cools. The air feels electrified. You smell the rain on the wind before you feel a single drop.
Arguments have that exact same atmospheric shift. There's always a charged silence right before the conflict begins. It's that moment where a tone shifts just a fraction of an octave, or a pause lingers 1 second too long, or someone's jaw clenches.
You can just feel it coming.
It's the click, click, click of the roller coaster right before it crests the hill and takes its first terrifying dive.
And Fisher points out that we almost universally waste this critical, quiet second. We use that moment of charged silence to load our weapons. We are rapidly searching our mental archives for a rebuttal, trying to figure out how to control the other person.
But rule number 1 of Fisher's methodology is say it with control. To seize that critical moment, you have to abandon the illusion that you can control them and focus entirely on controlling yourself. And he gives us a set of specific tactical tools to do this. Tool 1, your first word is your breath.
He shares a story about preparing a client named Elizabeth for a grueling deposition. Opposing counsel was notorious for being a bully. He liked to get under people's skin, rattle them, and break their credibility on the record.
So stressed.
Fisher knew this lawyer was going to try and steamroll Elizabeth. So during their prep sessions, Fisher played the role of the aggressive lawyer, firing rapid accusatory questions at her. And initially, Elizabeth crumbled. She froze. Her voice shook. Her eyes watered. She was experiencing classic fight or flight under the pressure.
So Fisher stops the prep and teaches her this specific physiological technique. He tells her, whenever you are about to answer a don't question, let your breath be your first word.
What?
Cut to the actual deposition. The aggressive lawyer is pacing, leaning in, and he barks at her. Fair to say you weren't paying attention at all that day, were you? Isn't that right?
The instinct there is to immediately jump in, speak rapidly, and defend your honor. But Elizabeth doesn't take the bait. Instead of rushing to defend herself, she stops. She takes a deliberate, slow breath.
She just paused.
She visibly drops her shoulders, taking a half-second entirely for herself to physically reset. And then, calmly and clearly, she says no.
The power dynamic in the room instantly shifted. The aggressive lawyer was completely derailed by her lack of reactivity. He tried to poke her again, leaning in closer. What's wrong? Did you not like my question?
And she just smiled.
Completely unbothered and said, oh no, I like your questions just fine. Again, the answer is no.
She completely deflated his aggression. And what's vital to understand is that this wasn't just Elizabeth possessing incredible mental fortitude. She was utilizing a biological hack. Fisher calls it the conversational breath.
How does it work?
It's a specific pattern. It goes like this. You inhale slowly through your nose for 2 seconds. Then, at the top of that breath, you take a sharp second inhale for 1 second. Then, you release a long, slow exhale through your nose for 6 seconds.
Okay, let's go deep into the science of why this exact pattern works, because it isn't just arbitrary counting. First, why breathe through the nose instead of the mouth?
Great question.
Breathing through the nose creates physical air resistance. It forces the air to travel slower and pulls it much deeper into your lower lungs, fully engaging your diaphragm. This deep, diaphragmatic breathing immediately counters the shallow, rapid chest breathing that the amygdala triggers during the ignition phase.
And that specific pattern, the double inhale followed by a long exhale, has a clinical name. It's called a physiological sigh. A prominent 2023 study out of Stanford Medicine found that this specific breathing pattern is one of the fastest, most effective ways to de-stress the human autonomic nervous system in real time.
That's incredible.
Here's the mechanics of how it works. When we get stressed, the tiny balloon-like air sacs in our lungs, called alveoli, begin to collapse and flatten out. This traps carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, which increases feelings of panic and agitation.
So when you take that long 2-second inhale, you are filling the lungs. But it's that sharp 1-second inhale that works the magic. That secondary burst of air physically pops those collapsed alveoli back open, massively increasing the surface area of your lungs.
Boom.
And then the slow 6-second exhale offloads a massive amount of carbon dioxide. Furthermore, a long exhale stimulates the vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem down to your abdomen. Stimulating the vagus nerve releases acetylcholine, which physically acts like a brake pedal on your heart rate, lowering your blood pressure on the spot.
You are manually overriding your own biology. By controlling the breath, you are sending an undeniable chemical signal to your brain that says, we are not being chased by a bear, we are safe. Shut down the alarm.
But let me ask a highly practical question here, because the theory sounds great, but execution is tricky.
Okay, lay it on me.
If I am in a heated, fast-paced argument in my kitchen with my partner, and they yell something accusatory at me, and I stop, close my eyes, take a 2-second inhale, sharp 1-second inhale, and then blow air out of my nose for 6 agonizing seconds, am I going to look completely insane? Doesn't that look incredibly dismissive? Like I am practicing yoga while they are pouring their heart out.
It is a very valid concern. If performed theatrically, yes, it will look patronizing. But Fisher emphasizes that it is called a conversational breath because you must weave it into the natural cadence of a dialogue.
How so?
You don't close your eyes and put your hands in prayer position. You can actually start the inhale while the other person is finishing the last few words of their sentence. Or you combine the exhale with a thoughtful nod, maintaining soft eye contact. Taking a 6-second delay before responding to a highly charged accusation doesn't make you look weird. It actually makes you look incredibly thoughtful, grounded, and in control of your faculties, as opposed to looking reactive and erratic.
That makes a lot of sense. You mask the biological hack with engaged body language.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've intercepted the breath. What is the next step in that split-second window? Tool 2. Your first thought is a quick scan. Fisher actually learned the foundation for this tool in a very unlikely place. His very first yoga class.
Yes, the image of a Texas trial lawyer in a dark studio, smelling like lavender essential oils, feeling completely out of his element, is quite funny.
Very funny.
The instructor told the class to lie on the floor and perform a body scan, mentally checking their body for tension from their toes up to their head. Fisher admits he felt ridiculous at first, but when he finally stopped fighting it and quieted his mind, he was shocked by the physical data he gathered.
He noticed that he was carrying immense tension in his face, particularly behind his ears. His shoulders were hiked up around his neck, and his jaw was locked tight. His physical body was holding massive amounts of stress, preparing for conflict, and his conscious mind was completely unaware of it.
Recognizing that physical tension is a precursor to emotional explosion, he adapted this into a 4-step quick scan that takes just 2 or 3 seconds to perform during a conversation.
Walk us through it.
Step 1, breathe. That is the conversational breath we just mastered. Step 2, close your eyes. Now, obviously, don't go to sleep. Fisher describes this as just a really long, deliberate blink. It briefly shuts off the visual data feed to your brain, reducing sensory overload.
Step 3, examine. As you are executing that long 6-second exhale, you rapidly search your body for physical tension and consciously command it to release. Drop your shoulders away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Relax your hands. And finally, step 4, label the emotion.
Give the feeling a specific name in your head. Don't just settle for, I'm mad. Dig deeper. Are you feeling pressure? Are you feeling dismissed, fearful, inadequate? And here is where this internal process becomes an external superpower. Once you have a label, you verbalize it to the other person using the phrase, I can tell.
Instead of letting the unexamined emotion dictate your behavior in silence, which usually results in yelling, you claim it out loud. You say, I can tell I'm feeling really overwhelmed by this pace right now, or I can tell I'm getting defensive about my work.
The psychology behind this is fascinating. The moment you claim an emotion out loud, it instantly diffuses its power over you. It brings the emotion out of the reactive amygdala and forces the prefrontal cortex to process it as language.
That's amazing.
The emotion is no longer this invisible, terrifying monster driving the bus. It has been reduced to a simple data point that you have acknowledged and placed on the table between you.
And it is so important to note that this isn't just woo-woo wellness or toxic positivity. The rhythmic breathing and systematic physical awareness we are talking about are the exact same tactical techniques utilized by Navy SEALs, first responders, and elite fighter pilots.
That's exactly right.
They use rhythmic counts like box breathing to deliberately lower their heart rate in combat zones so they don't lose their fine motor skills or tactical reasoning. If breath and body control are critical enough to keep a soldier alive in a firefight, it is absolutely critical for keeping your career alive in a boardroom or your marriage alive in your living room.
It is basic human operating system maintenance. So the body is calm, the physiological storm has been temporarily diverted, the parasympathetic nervous system is engaged. But now, your mind needs a clear, immediate directive to ensure that the words that actually come out of your mouth align with the values we discussed earlier.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Section 6. Controlling the mind, the small talk.
This is tool number 3. Your first conversation is a small talk. To explain this, Fisher takes us back to his very first trial as a young, inexperienced lawyer. He was going up against an opposing counsel who was a legend in the county, a guy with 30 years of trial experience.
Timid?
Very. Fisher was understandably intimidated. During his cross-examination, Fisher was nervous, his heart was racing, and he was rushing his words. Worst of all, he wasn't actively listening to the witness's answers because his internal monologue was entirely consumed by panic about what question to ask next.
He was completely stuck in his own head, projecting failure. He knew he was messing up the cross-examination, but he felt powerless to stop the spiral. Driving home that night, completely defeated, he started talking to himself out loud in the car, trying to process the day. And as he reflected, he started naturally clinging to these short, bite-sized phrases to comfort and focus himself. Phrases like, you be Jefferson, wait for the right pitch, I'll let the facts tell the truth.
The next morning, before court began, he wrote those exact phrases in bold letters at the top of his yellow legal pad. And the difference in his performance that day was night and day. He felt grounded. He didn't rush the witness.
Because he had an anchor.
Whenever he felt the panic rising, he looked down at the pad, read the phrase, and it anchored his mindset. He calls these internal directives small talks.
Because language literally influences our reality. A small talk is essentially a mini huddle with yourself. It's a short internal directive that aligns your brain's focus before you open your mouth to engage with the other person.
And Fisher lays out 3 specific rules for building an effective small talk, because you can't just use generic platitudes.
What's the first one?
Rule 1, tie it to your goals. Let's say your goal going into a difficult conversation with a teenager is simply to understand why they broke curfew, rather than punishing them immediately. Your small talk to yourself might be, seek to understand. That becomes your North Star for the interaction.
Rule 2. Start with verbs. You want to cultivate an active mindset, not a passive one. Our brains respond to commands. So don't use a passive therapy speak affirmation like, "My truth holds value." That's a nice sentiment, but it doesn't tell your brain what to do under pressure.
Right.
Instead, use an active verb, "speak my truth." That physicalizes the thought and propels you into action.
Rule 3, make it short and hyper-personal. It doesn't need to be a profound quote from Marcus Aurelius or an inspirational poster from a guidance counselor's office. It needs to bypass your logic center and tap directly into your emotional memory.
I love this part.
Fisher shares an incredible story about a client who constantly struggled with maintaining boundaries and staying assertive at work. She would always fold under pressure. After exploring her background, her small talk became the phrase, "Tellin' Doris."
I love the history behind that phrase. Doris was this client's grandmother, and apparently Doris was a force of nature. Whenever her grandmother would get fired up about a local injustice or something she deeply believed in, her grandfather would sit back, smile, and playfully say, "Tell him, Doris."
That's great.
So for this client, using that specific 3-word phrase in her head right before she had to negotiate a contract wasn't just about remembering a rule, it instantly invoked the emotional memory of her grandmother's strength, assertiveness, and refusal to back down.
It's basically like calling an audible at the line of scrimmage in football. The quarterback walks up to the line, looks across the field, and reads the absolute chaos of the defense showing blitz, which in our case is the argument, the raised voices, the sudden tension.
Right.
The quarterback doesn't have time to hold a meeting. He yells out a short-coded phrase, "Omaha," or "Tell him, Doris." And instantly that single phrase aligns the entire offense. Your brain, your breath, your posture, your values, they all snap into a coordinated alignment before the ball is even snapped.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. An audible only works because the team has practiced the underlying systems. A small talk works because you have already done the work of defining your values and controlling your breath. Replacing a spiral of panic with an active, hyper-personal verb phrase physically prepares your nervous system for the exact behavior you need to deploy in that moment. It takes all the complex psychological theories we have discussed today and compresses them into a 3-word trigger that you control, rather than letting the other person's anger control you.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, pulling apart the hidden gears and wires of how humans talk to each other.
We really have. Let's distill the journey we just took. We started by confronting the toxic, relationship-destroying goal of winning an argument, recognizing that crushing an opponent only leaves you standing alone in the rubble.
Very true.
We learned from a giant man in tan coveralls named Bobby Lepre that the angry, aggressive person you see in front of you is almost never the actual person you were talking to. They are just the tip of the iceberg of a hidden struggle.
From there, we dove into the biological reality of conflict. We explored how our bodies are literally hijacked by the sympathetic nervous system during the ignition phase. We saw how the amygdala floods us with adrenaline and suppresses the prefrontal cortex, entirely blinding us to logic and empathy, pushing us to attack as if our lives were in physical danger. We examined the hidden tripwires of social evaluation and identity that trigger these disproportionate reactions.
And finally, we equipped you with the tactical tools to intercept that biological hijacking. We learned how to utilize that charged silence just before the storm hits. We practiced the conversational breath, the physiological sigh that pops open the alveoli and forces the body to stand down. We walked through the quick scan to locate hidden tension and boldly label our emotions out loud. And we built our internal small talk to command our mindset like a quarterback calling an audible.
Ultimately, the pursuit of better communication is never about achieving perfection. You are still going to mess up. You are still going to occasionally lose your temper, say the wrong thing, or step on a psychological tripwire.
For sure, we all do.
But this framework is about approaching the next conversation with the courage to prioritize connection over conquest. It's about possessing the grace to understand that the people sitting across from you, whether they are your spouse, your boss, or a stranger on the internet, are fighting hidden battles you know absolutely nothing about.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over in the days ahead. We just spent an hour dissecting the mechanics of how to control your internal biology and mindset during a conflict. But consider the implication of the biology itself. If your body physically goes into a state of mortal panic, your heart racing, your pupils dilating, your logic completely shutting down, simply because another human being verbally disagrees with your opinion. What does that say about how deeply and perhaps dangerously we have tied our actual survival to the concept of being right? The next time you feel that heat rising in your chest, that ignition phase kicking in over a trivial debate, take a breath and ask yourself a very hard question. Are you actually in danger? Or is your ego just terrified of dying?
Answering that honestly changes the dynamic of every conversation you will ever have.
It really does. It reframes the entire world. So the next time you're sitting on your couch and you see those 3 little gray typing bubbles pop up on your phone screen and your stomach drops because you know the conflict is coming, don't panic. Don't let the amygdala win. Take a conversational breath. Do a quick scan of your shoulders. Call your internal audible and take complete control of your next conversation.